Hello there, good evening. Welcome to Look North, our top story tonight. On the 40th anniversary of the Battle of Orgreave, we'll hear from former miners and police officers about that pivotal and violent moment in the 1984 miners' strike. Campaigners have long called for a public inquiry. We'll hear what the political parties have to say about that. Also tonight, motor neuron disease campaigner Ian Flatt has begun a tough 3-week challenge with support from Rob Burrows' wife, Lindsay.
Rob knew I was going to do the walk and I never like letting people down. So just to be here today to support Ian and to see, the turnout is just fantastic.
Not long to go until the general election, but how many will use their vote? We've been back to one of the areas with the lowest turnout last time.
Well, this picture just about sums up the first half of June, taken in Sheffield this weekend. I'm happy to report that the second half of June does look a good deal drier and warmer. Join me for the very latest.
Hello there, good evening. Thank you for joining us. 40 years ago, striking coal miners from across Britain travelled to South Yorkshire's Orgreave coking plant in an attempt to disrupt deliveries. It was 3 months into a strike sparked by the threat of pit closures. Thousands of miners took part in the mass picket on the outskirts of Rotherham. They were met by around 6,000 police officers in what became known as the Battle of Orgreave. It was a pivotal moment in the year-long miners' strike and one of the most violent episodes in British industrial history. More than 100 picketers and police officers were injured. 95 miners were arrested and faced trial for riots and unlawful assembly until the charges were dropped a year later. Many of those involved say they still need answers about what happened and why. Later, we'll be hearing from a former police officer who was there and what the political parties are saying about calls for an inquiry. But first, we've been speaking to Steve Brunt and Robert Plant, two Chesterfield miners who were at Orgreave that day.
There's been the worst violence so far at the Orgreave coking plant near Sheffield.
The 100 Days War in the coalfields reaches a new climax with the most open, bloody battle yet between miners and police.
You've got to remember with Orgreave, we were directed there. This is a time when we were being stopped going anywhere else. We couldn't go into Nottinghamshire, South Derbyshire, sometimes into South Yorkshire were difficult.
Mounted, will you withdraw, please?
This time, they were telling us where to go, where to park and everything. And particularly on that day, on June the 18th, when the call had gone out, and we did get lads from South Wales, we did get lads from Scotland and from all over the country, really. What that demonstrated for me today was the enormous amount of resources in terms of police numbers. They geared up for that, and we were set up to fail and get battered, and that was simple.
A beautiful day, red hot. I got trainers on, jeans on, t-shirt. I were ready for no battle, like nobody else. We just had a wrestle actually, me and my friend. We had a bit of a laugh and what have you. And then we stopped and got up and we saw that the police lines were opening. And he says, something's happening. I says, oh, there's nothing happening. The next thing they did, the horses came galloping through and they trampled this guy about 5 or 6 metres from me, like it were okay to do that. And they just carried on going up the field. A few minutes later, I'm looking around, and the next thing I got arrested by the snatch squad. We went into the holding station where everybody who'd been arrested were queuing up to take the details. In the queue, there was a guy in front of me being beat by the police. One of them got me in the headlock. The other guy was pushing his shoulder down. And I counted 40 punches to the face. I thought, that don't look very good. And then my legs were going a bit rubbery. I thought, is it me next? And then rammed his head into the bottom of the stairwell, which I thought was just sheer brutal. There was no need for none of that.
Certainly the number of missiles thrown and the determination of the pickets to get through the lines has been as severe as anything that I've seen.
Burning barricades remained when the pickets finally withdrew. They demolished a stone wall to provide ammunition and act as an obstruction to the mounted police.
I do know, and on heart, none of our lads took bricks or stones. I mean, were accused of it. They didn't. The only time when it really got violent, and as I saw on this film, and they pulled that wall down, they were trying to stop the police, horses running up the road.
Minding my own business, that, mate.
First day on picket line is this for this lad, and that's what he gets.
It was very worrying and harrowing to think that you could have a life sentence. You know, I'm only 27. You know, thinking, what, you're going to get a life in prison for demonstrating about trying to save your job.
Well, last week I spoke to Tony Mundy, a retired Hertfordshire police officer who was drafted to help police the miners' strike. He was on the front line at Orgreave.
So we were in the front. There was bricks and stones and other things coming through the air. This seemed to go on for a long time. Then mounted officers, followed by officers with short shields, went through. I actually arrested an individual because there was a big surge towards our lines. As I was grappling with this individual and we were on the ground, surrounded by people, if we describe them as pickets, basically those people could have done me a lot of damage, but they didn't.
So you were asked to change your statement, weren't you? How did you feel about that?
Well, the senior South Yorkshire detective said to everybody very strongly, stop writing. He said, it's not a request, it's an instruction. Then dictated what I'd call a couple of paragraphs, effectively talking about fear and expectation of violence. And I recognise that as part of the definitions for riot.
And how did you feel that you've been asked to do that, Tony?
Well, it was outrageous, and protested, but we're told it was an order. And I thought, well, surely there's going to be a situation, either at court or a misconduct inquiry, where this can be explained, because in that room there must have been, say, about 20 officers, I'd say. And it's quite ridiculous that everyone in those circumstances would have the same opening paragraphs, which most importantly were not our words.
Would you support or take part in an inquiry about Orgreave?
So the short answer is yes, but the question is why now, after 40 years, are we still waiting? Because the essence of this for me is this. This was clearly corrupt behaviour by South Yorkshire Police. I really wanted and expected, once the case collapsed, that there would be a misconduct investigation and certainly a criminal investigation, because you're talking of perverting the course of justice, misconduct in a public office, and perjury. But nothing has ever happened, and that's wrong.
Well, in a statement, South Yorkshire Police say it would not be appropriate for the South Yorkshire Police of today to seek to explain or defend the actions of the force in 1984, as everyone involved in policing the miners' strike has long since retired and the information we hold has not been properly assessed. We have been very clear about our intent to make as much of the relevant documentation as is possible available to the public. To that end, a small team funded by the then Police and Crime Commissioner is reviewing and cataloguing all of the material held by the force and ensuring anything released is done so in line with the requirements of GDPR. There are 1,474 files of material which amount to 82,913 pages. When this work is complete, we will seek to follow the process undertaken both by the Home Office and the Cabinet Office and place the documents in a recognised public archive. This is expected to take another 18 months to 2 years. Well, the Orgreave Truth and Justice campaign has been pushing for an independent investigation since 2012. Last week, Labour committed to some form of inquiry into Orgreave. In the party's manifesto, they promised to bring the truth about the events at Orgreave to light. We asked Labour for further details about the type of inquiry they're proposing, as well as its expected timeframe and cost, but they've not yet responded. We approached all the major parties to see where they stand on this. The Conservatives say they would not hold an inquiry if re-elected. Their position on this hasn't changed since they ruled out an investigation into Orgreave in 2016. Whereas the Liberal Democrats, Reform UK and the Green Party all told us they were supportive of an inquiry in principle. Well, earlier I spoke to Conservative peer and chair of the Select Committee on Statutory Inquiries, Lord Norton of Louth. I started by asking him where he stands on whether there should be a public inquiry into Orgreave.
Well, I don't have a position on any particular inquiry. I'm more concerned because of my position chairing a committee looking at inquiries with the actual process themselves, establishing inquiries, and then particularly importantly, what happens once an inquiry has reported.
So tell us about that. What challenges come with launching a public inquiry?
Well, there are a number of issues with launching one. There are even more with once a committee an inquiry has reported. In establishing a committee, you've got the issue of what type of inquiry. They can be non-statutory. They tend to be relatively quicker to undertake. They don't have the sort of infrastructure that statutory inquiries have. And statutory inquiries, which people affected by particular issues who call for inquiries tend to prefer, because they are endowed with legal powers to summon witnesses to require evidence, but they can be quite lengthy and expensive. So some are relatively short, but others can go on for years. They can cost millions.
Who pays for these public inquiries?
It comes out of public funds. They're established, particularly statutory inquiries, because they are established under the Inquiries Act 2005.
It's 40 years since the Battle of Orgreave. What would an inquiry achieve?
Inquiries can be set up, but it depends what purpose that they're established for. So is it going to be sort of fact-finding? Is it looking at fault-finding, so what went wrong, if you like, who to blame? Or is it a lesson-learning inquiry? If there's been a problem, what caused it and what can be done to prevent its recurrence in the future? But once a committee has done its final report, it's published, the committee, the inquiry, ceases to exist. There is no formal mechanism that implements whether recommendations have been implemented, or no formal requirement for them to be implemented. So it really is dependent on those at whom the recommendations are directed, which typically tends to be government, as to what happens to them.
Lord Norton, thank you for your time.
You're very welcome.
And you can read a special report on the BBC News website about the events at Orgreave and the aftermath, told through the eyes of those two who were there on that day. Next tonight, MND campaigner Ian Flatt started his Seven Mountains Challenge at the weekend to raise money for the new Rob Burrow Centre for people living with the disease. He was joined by Lindsay Burrow, who said she will keep on supporting people with MND following her husband's passing earlier this month. I went to join them. Around 50 walkers gathered at the bottom of Whernside in the Dales for an 8-mile hike of one of Yorkshire's 3 peaks, the start of an epic mountain challenge for MND campaigner Ian Flatt. An emotional surprise when Lindsay Burrow joined the team just 2 weeks after her husband's passing.
Yeah, it's really important to me to be here to support Ian and the MND community. So Rob knew I was going to do the walk, and I never like letting people down. So just to be here today to support Ian and to see, you know, the turnout is just fantastic.
We're constantly amazed, aren't we, by Lindsay and her strength, and you know, she's so giving. It just means the absolute world that she's come here today.
The Seven Mountains Challenge was inspired by Rob Burrow, and he's remembered every step of the way. A makeshift bridge to get Ian across a brook named in his honour. 1 mile in and the challenge really begins as the terrain and incline changes. Walking up here might be quite simple for you or I, but as you can see for Ian, it takes a lot of manpower and a lot of effort for Ian as well. Yeah, certainly a lot of willpower. Oh. You're doing great, Ian. He's done many fundraising challenges since his MND diagnosis 5 years ago. 7 mountains over 3 weeks is the toughest yet, but Ian is positive as ever.
I'm not going to moan about it. so I can be out here having a glorious day. All these people, I'm having the time of my life. Of course it hurts. I'm going to sleep tomorrow. But it's worth it. It's worth it, you know.
As we near the summit, the weather changes and a decision's made to turn back.
When you see the effort, it's quite precarious on the edges for them. I'm worried somebody's going to get hurt. It's right to turn around now and get back and maybe have a sneaky Guinness on the way.
The descent is even more treacherous. Everyone is here for the same cause, to raise funds to build a centre for those living with MND and their families.
My wife Susie died of motor neuron disease in 2018, but there was nothing like the vision of the Rob Burrows Centre, and it's phenomenal to see Lindsay here. She's just an inspiration to all of us.
So much support here today, isn't there, for Ian, but for you especially?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been overwhelmed by people's, the outpouring of love and support since the announcement of Rob's passing, and that's been a real comfort. So thank you to everyone, whether it's been messages or cards, and I'm sorry if I've not got around to replying to them all, but just genuinely overwhelmed, and I think that's just testament to Rob and what a special person he was.
Well done, everybody.
6 hours later, we finally reached the end, wet and cold, but inspired by special people doing incredible things.
We've talked about trying to get it all the way around.
Have you?
It's kept me going.
Big thank you to Ian and the team for letting me join them. I had a brilliant time, despite the cold and the mosquitoes. Next tonight, a court has heard that a man found with a pressure cooker bomb outside St James's Hospital in Leeds was planning a murderous attack. 28-year-old Mahmoud Rahouk from Roundhay has gone on trial today and denies preparing acts of terrorism. A social affairs correspondent, Emma Glasby, sent this report from Sheffield Crown Court.
The jury was told today by the prosecution that Mohammed Farouk had become a self-radicalised lone wolf terrorist. Prosecutor Mr Jonathan Sandiford KC said that Mr Farouk had been employed as a clinical support worker at St James's or a trainee nurse, and that he had been arrested in the grounds of the hospital with a pressure cooker bomb, 2 knives and with an imitation firearm. Now, the prosecution said that Mr Farouk had planned to commit a terrorist atrocity by detonating the explosive device and then using the knives to kill as many nurses as possible. Now, the court heard that Mr Farouk had been spotted by a long-term patient at the hospital, a man called Nathan Newby, who thought something was amiss and began talking to him. And Mr Sandiford KC said that simple act of kindness almost certainly saved many lives that night, because he said Mr Farouk later told police that Nathan Newby had talked him down. Now, Mohammed Farouk has admitted possessing an explosive substance with intent, but he denies preparing acts of terrorism. The defence has told the jury that Mr Farouk will say that he was not radicalised and that he was not motivated by Islamic extremism. The trial here is expected to last for a month.
Well, with the election just a few weeks away, we've been to one of our constituencies which had one of the lowest voter turnouts at the 2019 general election. Only 49% of registered voters living in the newly formed Barnsley South constituency voted at the previous opportunity. Our political editor, James Vincent, has been to ask locals if they're going to be turning out to the polls this year.
When you look in a dictionary, look MPO. What does it say?
Member of Parliament?
No.
What does it say?
Professional liar.
How important do you think it is to vote, whether you're going to bother this time?
No.
You're not going to bother?
No.
Why is that?
I just think they're all a waste of time. I don't want to be responsible for bringing anyone into power.
Really?
Fair, yeah.
Have you always thought of that? Or
No, no.
So have you voted before?
Yeah, every time, every year, but not this time, no.
Most people here did not vote at all in the last general election. Barnsley South's turnout was 49%. Barnsley North's turnout wasn't much better. 5 years on, are people going to bother voting this time around?
I just think people have lost confidence in them all totally.
Why do you think that is? What's happened, do you think, that's made that?
I just think they've lost contact with the real people.
I have voted before, but I don't really know who to vote for now.
I mean, the things that I'm concerned with, they've not really mentioned much about, things like education. I'm a teacher myself, so I'd like to hear some changes being made in education.
Yeah, I voted last time.
and I'll vote again this time.
There's a lot of people, especially in Barnsley, that didn't vote. Do you understand why? People seem to be a bit...
Yeah, I think people are a little bit distant with the whole thing. I don't really understand that personally.
I think they are. I think everybody's
Not enough for it.
really had enough.
What would you say to people who, if they were thinking of not bothering, what would you say to them?
Well, if they don't vote, they can't get what they want, can they? You know, as simple as that, isn't it?
I think they do vote round here. I mean,
Did you vote last time?
yeah,
And you're going to vote this time?
yeah.
No.
And so that's you kind of think that all of the parties are kind of, whatever the party is,
Yeah.
they're going to mess it up?
They're all as bad as each other, in my opinion.
And that's not like even just apathy, that's kind of a bit of despair, isn't it?
Yeah.
Football now. Were you watching last night? Even if you missed it, I'm sure you've heard by now that England started their Euro 2024 campaign with a win over Serbia. Hooray! Hundreds of fans packed into the pubs to watch the match. Others were lucky enough to be in the stadium itself. Olivia Richwald wasn't that lucky, but she did join some at a pub in Leeds.
From the stadiums and fan zones in Germany to the living rooms and pubs back home in Yorkshire, this isn't just about football, this is about hope and pride.
I'm very optimistic. I think Bellingham goal and England 3-0 maybe. I'm very optimistic.
I think that we're going to win 3-1. I think Serbia will score first in the early minutes of the game, but we'll score 2 after that.
Yeah, it looks a fairly decent side, so I don't think we'll have much of a problem, hopefully.
At the Beck and Call pub in Meanwood, Leeds, the owners had gone big, with 4 outdoor screens and 9 more inside. More than 450 people were watching. The owners are hoping for a bumper England Cup run. And those feeling optimistic made it 1-0.
Still saying 3-0. You're pleased with the performance so far? Bellingham, masterclass. Belly go!
Serbia improved in the second half, and as the light and the temperature dropped outside the pub in Leeds, the tension rose. And it was a huge relief when England clung on and won. Some Yorkshire fans were lucky enough to be there in Germany in person.
The England fans are just amazing. They really are. They're so passionate and they just love it. And it's really good. It's lovely to see all the different flags.
If you just look out, you could just see a big sea of white shirts, blue shirts, red shirts, and just there was England fans. Like they had flags. They were all over the stadium.
As a Spurs fan, I'm obviously, I thought Harry Kane could have done a bit better. But Jude Bellingham absolutely, supported all the team. He was everywhere. And we just want more of that, really.
The crowd in Leeds was relieved, but maybe a tad less optimistic.
Gareth's going to be a little bit disappointed with that, but I think we've got some great players we didn't see tonight. We've got potential.
A bit wobbly, but I think that we could win.
Okay.
We can still win.
Were you wearing your shirt and your scarf watching that match last night?
I was. I mean, we won, but a bit boring, wasn't it, in the second half?
I
But
don't
anyway,
know.
we won.
I was at a Girls Aloud concert, so I don't know.
Wow,
They were good. That wasn't
VIP
boring.
again, Amy, was it?
Sadly not. We were right in the cheap seats at the back, but it was
Right.
still very good.
Quite right too, you suited it. Let's have a look at the pictures that you sent in the last few days. Well, this tells its own story about what the first half of June's been like. A big cumulonimbus cloud, the view from the campsite there in Robin Hood's Bay. And this was Meadowhall, actually. What a fantastic shot, although if you walked out of the shopping centre, I'm sure you wouldn't want to see that because it was chucking it down. But I have good news for a change. Just let me give you the contacts first, because if you want to send your pictures in, the addresses are on your screen right now. But after what's been the coldest start to June since 1991, I can promise you, of course, a warmer and drier second half of June. Things are looking up. We're not promising a heat wave or anything, but we're promising an improvement, and it certainly will see a recovery in temperatures. So there's your headline tomorrow. Unfortunately, there is still a risk of some sharp showers tomorrow, especially across the Pennines. But this little ridge of high pressure keeps that system over the continent, that system up to the northwest. So once we get rid of those showers tomorrow, much of the week should be dry and, as I say, quite warm with some sunshine. Now there's a radar picture. We've still got some showers across North and East Yorkshire. They will move off into the North Sea. Elsewhere, There's some sunshine around. Overnight looks set to be fairly quiet. It's dry with clear spells. A bit of mistiness in rural areas, and we are looking at overnight lowest temperatures down to 8 Celsius. That's 46 Fahrenheit. So tomorrow's high water time, Scarborough 2:16. Briglington at 2:37. So a nice start, dry and bright. There will be some sunshine around, but it won't be long before clouds bubble up. And you can see the main focus of the heavy downpours across Pennine areas. I think the further east you go, the more likely you're to have a dry and quite sunny day. In fact, the coast should have a lovely day tomorrow. Temperatures in the brighter spots reaching 18 Celsius. That's 64 Fahrenheit. Tomorrow evening, those showers gradually moving into Lancashire. Elsewhere, it's fine and sunny. And then a quick look at the further outlook. We've not seen something like that for quite some time. That's the forecast.
Oh my goodness, can we finally stop wearing our winter coats?
Yes, indeed.
We might be able to stop taking our umbrellas out as well.
What could possibly go wrong here,
What could possibly go wrong? That is it from us. Corinne's here with the late news. Bye-bye for now.